Now, loyal Trailer Hitch listeners know that we have sent messages from the future before. This is going to be our first time sending messages from the past because James and I are actually recording early. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, one of us who shall remain nameless has to be out of town for a little bit. So we don't want to skip an episode for you guys. We know you're chomping at the bit for Trailer Hitch. So here we are. We're doing this early for you guys.
Yeah. We definitely do not have to name the person. That's right, James. Thank you for making sure that people don't know that I am flying to Guam for an experimental cosmetic operation. I figured it was high time for me to try getting collagen lips. It's something that I've always wanted to do. You can't talk me out of it.
So we are telling people about it. Okay, I wasn't sure.
Well, the Trailer Hitch listeners are probably going to end up seeing our new image where my lips just look like the size, like two balloons, and they're going to be like, what happened here? It's going to come out anyway. I may as well just bring it up now, get ahead of it, let you all know, yes, I will be looking far hotter after my trip to Guam.
Your PR is top notch right there.
Exactly, yeah. Steal the thunder so that way we don't have to talk about my lips once that happens. We can just talk about trailers and specifically movies too. So even though we are recording this a little bit ahead of time, we were fortunate in that the Ghostbusters Afterlife trailer did come out before we were destined to record. Mm-hmm. So we will be talking about that. But also, there's going to be more trailers coming out in that time. One trailer does not an episode make. What else could we possibly talk about? Well, good news. We are finally going to keep to our word and actually talk about some movies that we gave double need to sees twos. Yes, when we do give trailers 2 need to see ratings, we go see the movie and report back to you guys. And that's what's happening here. So we have in the can for you guys In the Heights. We also have The Mitchells versus the Machines. And I think we should just get right to it, James. How about you?
I've literally been waiting for this theme song. It's playing in my head already. So why don't we just let the listeners join in with what's in my head right now?
You can't haul your stuff without a trailer hitch. Trailer hitch.
Releases by the movie trailers. We're Trailer Hitch. This movie might totally suck, but the whiskey sure is going down fine. Yeah, we're Trailer Hitch.
James, did that theme song sound just as good outside of your head as it did inside of your head?
It always sounds better outside of my head, if I'm being honest.
Although now that I'm thinking about it, in theory, for you to hear it, it has to be inside your head again. God damn it. What a metaphysical conundrum.
Well, this moment, me talking into the microphone, yes. But me listening on the other end.
Speaking of heads, mine hurts. Hi, welcome to Trailer Hitch. I'm Kevin.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm James.
This is Trailer Hitch, where we rate and review movie trailers. We rate them on a scale of need to see more, or never need to see. If James and I both like a trailer, we give it double need to sees. Go see the movie, report back to you guys in a segment called Trailer in the Rear View, in which we talk about the trailer in retrospect and then review the film writ large. So we are going to be keeping our word on a couple of those movies that we gave double need to sees to, but also seeing if one other will join that pantheon. So we do have one trailer to talk to you guys about before we get into our movie reviews. Because this is something that I think our first teaser for this came out either during the pandemic or right before the pandemic.
Well, it was definitely pre-pandemic when the teaser came out. So we are going on 1.5 years now of, not getting any marketing for this movie.
Right.
Since then.
And now we have way more to go off of. I think I remember the very first thing we saw was just like a 5 to 10 second clip where someone goes into a barn and lifts up a sheet and whoop, it's the Ghostbusters logo, and that was it. Okay, now that we have substantially more footage, will we like it? Let's find out.
Egon came out here for a reason.
Are you troubled by strange noises in the middle of the night?
Do you experience feelings of dread in your basement or attic?
Have you or any of your family ever seen a spook, specter, or ghost?
Go, go, go!
We're closed.
There's stranger things in your neighborhood. Who are you going to call? Sorry, that was a call and response for you, James. Who are you going to call? I'm genuinely curious.
Clearly, Jason Reitman, who's spearheading this bad boy. Am I right?
He is the director of Ghostbusters Afterlife. He is also the co-writer, as is Gil Keenan. This is starring Finn Wolfhard, McKenna Grace, Carrie Coon, Paul Rudd, our random shout-out, because we here at Trailer Hitch like to give random shout-outs to cast and crew members, because the top-billed people tend to hog all the credit. So we are going to shout out Jason Nolan, who was a location scout. Hey, Jason, thanks for finding some cornfields for that really old station wagon to drive through, bud.
I have my doubts if that thing would have made it through like 10 feet of that cornfield. It would have got all caught up in the gears and the axle, and because I know things about cars, so I said the axle. And then
I'm assuming it would start popping popcorn in the engine somehow.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm like, that's just gonna get stuck there.
So this is Ghostbusters Afterlife. So brief summation, we got a family who's moving out to the sticks. The kids are kind of outcasts, sort of considered weirdos and loners. They moved out because the family's broke and they're just moving into this old ass farmhouse that their grandfather left behind. Well, is there anything our grandfather left us? Well, he had trouble paying the bills, but he did leave something in the barn. Wait a second. That's the Ghostbusters station wagon. So now all of a sudden we've connected. These kids are the grandkids of one of the Ghostbusters. Do you know which Ghostbuster they are the grandkid to, James?
Yeah, they're the grandkids of Egon.
Okay, perfect. So Egon's grandkids are hanging out in the middle of a field one day, because that's what you do in a small town, sign someone who grew up in a small town. And then out from a hole, boom, fucking ghosts galore. They start ravaging the town, and the kids take it upon themselves to use their grandfather's equipment to try and sweep the town of unjust ghosts. And then right at the end of the trailer, we get this little hit where they're like, we need additional help. And so then they give a call. A red phone rings, and we see an old hand pick up a phone and say, we're closed. Wait a second, that sounded like Bill Murray. Oh, shit! And that's the end of our trailer. Now, big things to take out of this trailer so far is, yes, we have some kids. Oh, okay, so we have a bunch of kids in a small town, and then some creepy supernatural things happens. Haha, it's kind of like Stranger Things. You then squint. Oh, son of a bitch. Yes, you're right. That is Finn Wolfhard, one of the Stranger Things kids. They knew you were going to go there. They probably had it in mind, and they went, you know what? Fuck it. We're just going to cast the guy. We may as well. Now, they got Finn Wolfhard. Yes, they are in a small town. And yes, to a degree, there is a lot of nostalgia bait within this trailer. Not just with the Ghostbusters property, but you can also see it within the locations that our buddy Jason mentioned earlier clearly helped to find. We have these older 50s style diners. We have these older signifiers kind of throughout the town, because this seems like a town that has effectively been stuck in the past in some ways, hasn't really been updating along with like a bigger city might. And so that nostalgia not only carries through with the Ghostbusters property, but through the trailer in its entirety, which I thought was actually a really clever choice, because then it's not just about making the nostalgia, hey kids, you remember proton packs, right? But it is also kind of saying, hey kids, fuck, there was a time when you could get a Coca-Cola for 15 cents. Holy shit. Yeah, that's right. So this nostalgia does carry through the entire trailer, but in really unexpected ways for me. And then in addition, I really liked the touches where they were watching the Ghostbusters ads on YouTube, that this would be something within the context of that universe, just be preserved on YouTube, and would just be something that a kid is kind of mind clicking at, clearly for them to connect with their grandparents. Yeah, I was really taken aback by how the nostalgia did seem really baked within this trailer, but in a way that I found actually kind of refreshing. The only thing off the top right now, man, that I'm really missing is the humor. Because let's face it, Stranger Things is a lot of things. But how often do you laugh? Be honest. And that's the thing, is that influence from Stranger Things also does kind of carry through here, where, yeah, I wasn't really finding myself laughing that much. Whereas with Ghostbusters 1 and 2, and the 2016 version, just because I know that's a weird fucking political flashpoint for some reason. Hey, it's possible to like all three of the movies. I did. James, did you like all three of the movies?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, shit, look at that.
I think I was in the minority that I actually enjoyed the Paul Feig one.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the Paul Feig one as well. The thing that we can say throughout all three of those movies is they are all funny. And that was, I think, kind of an interesting choice to sort of not incorporate that humor. I don't know if the idea is like, hey, we're going to highlight kind of that nostalgia and kind of highlight our character connections, and then the comedy can kind of come as a tasteful surprise with the movie itself, or if I should just go in not expecting to yuck at all. But James, I've been talking for a bit. What are you thinking, feeling with Ghostbusters?
That's a fair point. I'm a very, very big Jason Reitman fan, but to your credit, Kevin, I don't really recall many films where they were just like a laugh riot. And there's always humor present in his films, but it's usually always wrapped in a sense of, I don't know, melancholy or
A bit, yeah. I think
like just dryness,
I would say Thank You for Smoking and Juno are probably his two most laugh out loud funny ones.
Those were the ones that came to mind as well, but I feel like those also are just kind of like not Ghostbusters funny,
Yeah, I would say to a degree. They're not necessarily going for quips. Juno, we can argue whether or not hamburger phones and Diablo Cody making up slang counts, but we can do that on our own time. But yeah, you're right. I would say for the most part, Jason Reitman isn't necessarily always trying to go for a laugh. That's totally fair.
Now, humor aside, though, I was really into this trailer. The beginning stuff with like Paul Rudd and the mom in the restaurant, it's like good for like setup purposes, but it's also like every time Paul Rudd said something, I'm just like I don't know, it just felt a little forced.
Yeah, I completely agree with that too. Like it did feel exposition-y, and yeah, it's something that I'm keeping in the back of my mind. And it's something I will say that Stranger Things did really well is I always felt like the adult characters within that first season were just as interesting as the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, I think the only thing really holding me back from just screaming on the rooftops, hey, you all should watch this trailer, is right now the characters do feel kind of placeholdery a bit to me. Really, the only connection that I have to the grandkids right now is they're the grandkids of a character that I like. And right now, I don't really know much about Carrie Coon at all, other than seems like single mom raising two kids, had to move to the secluded farm because ran out of money. But outside of that, I don't really know too much about her. But I don't know if she's participating in any of the ghost busting at all.
I mean, not by
not that we've seen. Yeah. So it is interesting because you're right. I think the trailer does sort of position it with that opening conversation to be, yeah, we're focused on the mom right now. And then once the kids are established and then the ghosts come out, then at that point, it's the kids' show through and through. And I don't necessarily know how Carrie Coon is going to fit into the proceedings after that.
It's definitely the kids' movie when it comes time to focusing on the kids, especially when they start finding like the Ecto-1 and the ghost trap and everything like that. I'm just really having a good time with it. And the thing that really drove this trailer home for me is definitely the YouTube video. And it's not just like this clever way of getting in some footage from the original film. It's also really effective. Like when you start hearing those voices from that commercial for the Ghostbusters from the original movie, it just took me back and it like kind of gave me goosebumps, but it was actually overcut really well with the visuals too. Are you seeing specters and ghosts? All that kind of stuff is paired and married with like really interesting visuals and it was setting the mood really well. We've already talked about the mood wasn't really humorous yet, but the mood was eerie, and I like eerie, you know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And just because of how old the town is, there is kind of this feeling like it is haunted before even the ghosts show up, just with how outdated everything looks.
Yeah.
Which, again, I think is a really clever choice. I think its setting honestly does a ton of the heavy lifting for that atmosphere, and I totally co-sign it. And yeah, I think it's ultimately a question of, is that atmosphere, is that mood enough, or are you missing out on those characters? Now, James, how about you? Where are you at?
I don't know. I think this is enough for me. I believe the humor will be there, but even if it's not, even if it's legitimately not a funny movie, I got enough from this trailer that made me go, "Hey, even if this isn't funny, it looks like something I would still like really really enjoy." And if I wanted just laughs, I can always just watch the Paul Feig one.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah. So rating wise, if that's what you were hunting for, ghostbusting
yes.
for, I'm really into this. I'm really excited about this. Maybe it's because it's been built up in my mind for so long because I've known this was coming for like 2 years now. Is that fair? No, but oh well. It's a it's a need to see it for me.
Okay. So right now, biggest sources of concern for me is, God damn it, where are my yachts? That's
Yeah.
number one. Number two, okay, okay. So the reason why I hesitated, James, is because the way that I described it also inadvertently dunks on one of your favorite franchises. So it is kind of like the Ray problem that I had with the new trilogy, the new Star Wars trilogy. So
Okay.
if the most interesting thing about your characters is they are related to other characters that I'd rather be watching right now, I tend to not connect nearly as much. Ultimately, I feel like I'd rather just be watching that character, and whether that is like for what it's worth, I don't think it's the worst within this new Star Wars trilogy. I actually think the second Independence Day movie is a huge offender in that. It really did hurt my enjoyment for that one.
God, talk about a movie that I have not had to think about in a long time. Thanks for really, taking me back to memory lane, Kevin, with Independence Day resurgence.
Yes, but so like the new Star Wars trilogy, okay, that problem is there, but I still, obviously we've had discussions. I still enjoy that new Star Wars trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've also had that problem with a movie like Independence Day 2, where I'm like, man, I did not enjoy that shit at all. So is the characters are just related to someone else enough for me to say, well, this is gonna suck? Well, no, because I might have that problem, but still overall come out enjoying the movie. And again, I know it's one of like those weird artsy bullshit things that of course I'm the only asshole who would say anything about. But again, like the fact that the nostalgia does feel like it's baked in entirely. Do you think I'm fucking crazy when I'm saying all this, by the way? You didn't comment on it at all. Did you think that was off base?
No, not at all. I'm kind of processing it and I'm trying to think. I'm like, okay, like let's say I watch this trailer right now and them being like the descendants of one of the Ghostbusters wasn't part of the trailer. Would I be finding enjoyment in this? And I'm having a hard time thinking about it. I think I would, but that's what I'm trying to frame my brain into,
Well, in addition to that is like the concept that, hey, yeah, there is nostalgia for Ghostbusters within this, but the fact that they're in this town with like 50s style diners and all the technology kind of seems outmoded in some ways. Do you think that also positively plays into those nostalgia influences too, or am I fucking high?
I don't think you're fucking high. I think it's definitely somewhere in the middle.
I'm about a third of a way through a beer.
So that's the happy middle ground that I'm trying to describe.
Okay, so I'm about a third of the way through a beer on that. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I do think that there is something here that is gripping me, even if I am having some issues with it. So this trailer right now, it's also a need to see for me.
Wow, did not expect that. All right, well, cheers, Kevin.
Cheers.
Clink, clink, clink. Viggy, 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 you've been a bad monkey. That's from Ghostbusters 2.
Good pull.
That Ghostbusters 2 was actually my first Ghostbusters movie.
Oh, was it really?
It was, and I was obsessed with it as a kid. And then I watched the first one, and I'm like, this is kind of the same.
It's
obviously
very much the fucking same.
but obviously,
speaking as someone who likes Ghostbusters 2, it is very much the fucking same.
yeah. So, well, this one looks a little different though. So there you go.
Slightly different. Yes, exactly. All right, man. Well, we will go ahead. We will see Ghostbusters Afterlife when it comes out. But we already have a couple of movies that we said we were going to see and then report back to you guys. So we specifically have to keep our word that we were going to survive the robot apocalypse, much like the Mitchells had to in The Mitchells versus the Machines.
Is that a burnt orange 1993 station wagon? Or is it...
Who are these unstoppable warriors?
We're the Mitchells, the only people who can save the world.
I would be willing to upgrade me from a need to see more with Connected to a need to see for this.
Fantastic. I am staying solid at my need to see it from Connected to...
Hey, double need to see!
So we got a double need to see, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey Siri, do me a favor and sit this one out, because we are talking about the Mitchells versus the Machines. So... James, we saw a couple of trailers for this, and now I remember the very first one ended up making your top 5 of whatever year it came out in terms of your favorite trailers. Now, we are talking about the most current trailer that came out, the one where, because this had like an interesting tumultuous history where this was a Sony Pictures film that ended up getting sold to Netflix. And the trailer we are talking about is once this was an official Netflix trailer. And now when we first reviewed that, this trailer is about 3 minutes and some change. I remember us talking about how it felt like it was showing us a little bit too much of the movie. And now that we've seen the movie, we can actually look back and say whether or not this did reveal too much. Now, out the gate, I will say that, yeah, I mean, I knew that the movie was going to go a certain direction. I wouldn't necessarily say it was due to this trailer, but I would say that it didn't necessarily help that the trailer included some of the images that happen pretty late into the movie. But that said, the emotional depth within this movie came as a complete fucking surprise to me. So I wouldn't say this gave away too much, but how about you?
Too much? No. But yes, like we talked about, they definitely show some stuff specifically revolving Rick Mitchell, the dad, and maybe his surroundings. And it's just kind of like, well, I guess he ends up there, you know? And it's just like, it's so obviously the ending of the movie. But you make a good point that this movie was not just about the conflict of the Mitchells versus the Machines. It was, going back to the original title, it was also the conflict of just connecting with your family. And therein lied the emotional impact that Kevin was talking about that is not given away in the trailers, or not like ruined in the trailers, you know? So no, I do not feel like, you know, stuff was spoiled for me.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I would also say that this does get across the visual style of the movie really well. It is as kinetically edited as the movie itself is. I will say that once we get into the review of the movie itself, there is a question of, hey, do you like that style? And if the answer is no throughout that 3-minute trailer, just a heads up, it's dialed up to fucking 20 in the movie itself. And that, like, that's not just like through chunks of the movie. That is the movie in its totality.
Yeah, so you're gonna have a nauseating time if you were not a fan of this animation style based off the trailer alone.
Definitely, yeah. But then I think it's also a question if you watched it and went, yeah, I like this style. It is worth asking yourself, will you like it for an hour 45? Because that is what it is the entire time. And obviously you can't necessarily have a trailer say, like, warning, this is just what it is. But that is something I think if you are still on the fence about seeing the movie, and if you're going off of this trailer as we did, that is something worth considering. Is now that we've seen it, we can say, yeah, that's not just for montages or anything. That is the style throughout the entire film. And I feel like that's just as good a bridge as any to get into it, man. What did you think about the movie? And what I guess we'll start with that visual style. I will say that this is, at least in part, the creative team that was behind Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is a movie that I really loved, and specifically something I loved about it was its artwork and was how kinetic that was in its editing and how trippy its visual style could get at points. And so I walked into it really excited to get more from that team. And since this movie is from the perspective in part of a Gen Z kid that's obviously really influenced by YouTube and really silly stuff, that's the sort of style that they bring into here. And I liked it, but definitely toward the end, for the first time with a Lord and Miller animated piece, in part, I know they were just producers on this, but this was the first time where I started to kind of feel exhausted by the end. But how about you? Did you feel that at all, or were you just in for the fucking sugar rush the entire time through?
I definitely wasn't feeling exhausted. I was in for the sugar rush, as you so deliciously put it. But yeah, it's hard not to kind of make comparisons and parallels to Into the Spider-Verse. Like you said, Lord and Miller, when it comes to like their animated productions, they are the forefront of innovating animation. I mean, if we can go all the way back to Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and just being like this alternate wacky animation style compared to what Pixar has been giving us, right?
Yeah.
So going all the way back to that, then Lego Movie, then Into the Spider-Verse, which just melted my brain. Like, it was absolutely amazing. With this one, I was just like completely enthralled in it, and I was excited to see it. But I did think it was a bit much at times. I didn't get exhausted, but there were times where I went, I really dig that they're pushing the envelope with the animation style here. I don't know if that means does it have to be dialed up to 11 all the time.
Mhm.
So these are questions that I juggled in my brain, but I never got exhausted with it. I was in it until the end. You know, I was really, really into the animation style, but not as much as Into the Spider-Verse. So those are my thoughts on animation style.
Yeah. And it's something that, again, I give that team a lot of credit because they do seem to be really in tune to what POV the character is from, and what I think with Spider-Man specifically, the influences within that too. Obviously, that is very comic book inspired because it was dealing with a multiverse that did really free them to go batshit with their visual style too. And again, because this is from the perspective of a Gen Z kid, yeah, I totally understand where this is coming from. And with their other animated movies like Lego Movie and things like that, I think the motivation is always there, and that is something that I really respect and admire about their animated productions. Is it never feels like they're doing it just for the sake of it. There is a reason behind it, and I do always appreciate that. But with this one in particular, yeah, I think especially once we got to that final fight, I was starting to feel some of that, okay, this might be a little bit too much for me, or a little bit too busy. And I was able to keep up with everything, but it was just hitting a point where I was kind of ready for the movie to be over.
Yeah. You know what? Part of me is just like, do I actually agree with Kevin here, or am I just trying to fight that urge to sound old? Like, I want desperately to not have to side with Danny McBride's character, Rick Mitchell here. But man, it's hard not to watch this movie and just kind of get a little curmudgeon about
Winded, I think. Winded is the word.
I'm just like, oh no, I'm old. Like, when did it happen? I don't remember. I don't have any children, so I don't feel old, but
I mean, I feel like really our true test, man, will be once Gen Z is specifically making art, because you still have to bear in mind, this is from the perspective of a character that's Gen Z, as told to you by two men who are older than us. They're probably Gen X. So,
Sure.
Yeah. That's something to keep in the back of your cap. But yeah, when it comes to the narrative of the movie, I ended up really connecting with that emotional arc between Katie and Rick quite a bit. And it's not something that I necessarily have a personal connection with. I feel like my dad, think very kindly, and I'm grateful for it, has always been really supportive of me, especially with all my weird art bullshit. But Katie does not necessarily have that relationship with her father, but you can tell that still Rick is trying, and their methods of disconnection are really genuine, and you can see where both of them are coming from. I never felt like the movie was ever like completely imbalanced in that regard. Um, the movie is very much about, hey, you have to be able to meet another person in the middle in order for any sort of relationship, in this case one that is paternal, in order for that to be successful once you become an adult. Like, you kind of have to find a way to meet halfway. And granted, at some points Rick is just a complete doofus, but the fact that Katie still manages to hit that halfway point, I think, especially with what's going on with the wooden moose, ended up really resonating with me. And the fact that Katie was able to see, I'm not making that much of an effort to connect with my dad on some of his interests. So to a degree, it kind of makes sense that he's not actively understanding my interests at all either. I thought really worked.
Yeah, the wooden moose through line in the movie is excellently done, because at the beginning, you get this wooden moose and you already know Rick is like an outdoorsy guy. You kind of like just imprint this stuff onto the wooden moose. Like, oh, he probably just like carved it for Katie. And that's good enough. Like that already works if you just think of it on those terms alone, right?
Mm.
But then it really unpeels some layers behind the wooden moose.
Exactly.
And it's just like, oh my God, I did not expect this wooden moose to mean even more than it was already succeeding in meaning,
Absolutely, dude. Yeah,
and
I completely agree.
and I was just blown away. And that's one of those little things that you're never going to get that in a trailer. You're never going to get that in a trailer, because
nor would I want it. No.
Nor exactly. But I'm commending how, there are still things in movies that it's like, you wouldn't put this in a trailer because it's not interesting in a trailer. But that means it's yours in the movie, and you get to really, really experience some great, great stuff in a movie when it's really character driven, like the moose stuff. So big, 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 big fan of the moose.
Yeah. So outside of the visual style, I think with that narrative, I think the only thing, and this is going to be a real half-baked thought, so fucking buckle up, buddy. But something that I'm kind of noticing now is, once we had the 80s, it hit a point where we had pretty familiar screenwriting beats. Like, we had I think that was really right around the time when Sid Field was king. So a lot of movies were structured in a really similar way. I think we are starting to hit kind of a new story structure for movies. And I think specifically it's the turning point that happens at the 2/3 mark, where the thing that will save the day gets destroyed and will make you think that everything is fucked. But we all know full well that it's not fucked. When it comes to Mitchells and the Machines, I'm specifically talking about the flash drive being destroyed.
Yeah.
And again, it's hard because, and that's why this is half baked, is I can't really pull too many examples, but at the same time, that sort of style of story beat of, hey, we just pulled the rug out from under you at the 2/3 mark, where now everything, like, we've completely upended what you thought was necessary in order for the characters to succeed. Maybe it's not quite as directly the same, but I think one of those one of the first moments that I was cognizant of it was actually in Frozen when the bad prince turns out to be bad. Like that rug pull moment at the 2/3 mark where, oh fuck, this completely reorients these characters in a really interesting way. And I think when did Frozen come out? What, 2013? I think when back then something like that felt really fresh and unique and like really cool. I think we are starting to hit a point weirdly in 2021 where when they were like, we got to get to this place and we got to get this flash drive and yada yada, I kept thinking in the back of my mind, I don't buy this for a goddamn second. Like I don't buy either they're not going to get it or they will and then it'll break, but then they'll figure out some other way to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe in part that's because they did this with Into the Spider-Verse, where a flash drive ended up breaking. And just because it was the same studio, maybe that was part of what was triggering it for me. But I have noticed that sort of style kind of crop up. And it's not at the point where I feel like it's completely derivative, but it is hitting a point where I think that sort of trick has sort of lost some of its luster on its own. And so there were points where I did feel like I would get a little bit ahead of that story. The only times when I feel like that is an issue for me is, well, how long's the movie? And The Mitchells versus the Machines is like almost 2 hours. For an animated family film, it is kind of pushing on the longer side. So when a movie it's kind of like a magician, but you've already figured out how the trick is working, and you're kind of twirling your wrist as this person is, fucking tapping their hat, and you're like, I know the goddamn bunny's coming out. Just show me the bunny. Like, this is already long enough as it is.
Right.
But again, it's not necessarily a deal breaker, but it was hitting a point where I think because I was getting so overwhelmed by that visual style, it did hit a point where I then started looking at the story structure and then saying, yeah, that flash drive's going to get fucking wrecked somehow. But I do think that the story is doing, and the screenplay is doing interesting things too. You were completely right, man. And I was going to comment on that. Yeah, the fact that they kept revealing new means of connection between Rick and that fucking moose, I thought was superbly handled. And so I'm not coming out and saying that this movie is entirely derivative or anything, but I will say that some of its tricks didn't quite work for me.
Interesting thought process. I am glad, I guess I can't read between the lines of structure as well as you can, because then I think it's going to take me maybe twice as long to catch on to these kinds of trends. I mean, you have a writing background. It makes complete sense to me. Whereas I think I just let things wash over me a little bit more, and instead of, I don't know, they live glasses. I feel like you got the cheat glasses on, Kevin, because you have writing experience, so you can see through the bullshit. And I'm just like, look at all this bullshit. I love it.
But James, it says obey.
It says obey. I'm obeying. I'm having a great time with it.
That's the best way we can exemplify this fucking podcast, is it's just me and you in an alleyway just duking it out as I'm telling you to put on the fucking glasses. But yeah, it was something, again, that I don't think necessarily would have stuck out to me if it wasn't for, one, the length, and two, the fact that, yeah, this visual style is kind of overwhelming at points, particularly in the action set pieces where a lot is happening at once. Like, especially when the robots first attack when they're in the diner, there's people getting sucked up into the sky and debris being thrown around. And then in the middle of that, we have our characters who are pulling focus in the action. And I will give credit to the director of this piece that I never necessarily lost the characters within the frame, but I was just trying to clock everything that was happening. And it's supposed to be disorienting in those moments, and I co-sign that. But when the movie is also as long as it is, it does hit a point where it's like, my brain just needs a second to check out. What else could I be thinking about with this movie right now? And at the very least, I was thinking about something involving the movie and not, what should I have for dinner tonight? So, if the movie is working. But yeah, that was just something that sort of came to mind.
That's fair. And I think I did because I saw this movie twice, and I think I felt the length a little bit more in the second watch. Not that I was getting like exhausted by the end, but there were just scenes that you tend to just like check your phone, especially when you're watching a movie a second time. It's just like, oh man, I'm checking my phone a little bit here. I'm not really paying attention. Okay, let's focus again, you know? So maybe the length I was feeling definitely more.
Sure. When it comes to our movie reviews, we rate them on a scale of should see again, glad I saw it, should have waited, or shouldn't have seen it. Now, James, you did mention you saw this twice. Did you just tip your hand into what you would rate this?
I didn't actually, because I like to save should see it again for like the tippy top, like my favorite films, right? And I don't think this one was quite there. I saw it again because Netflix makes it easy to see stuff again, Kevin.
That's very true.
And I think I just wanted to watch it with Jenny. The first time I watched it by myself, and the second time I watched it with Jenny. So no, this one is a very solid glad I saw it.
Yeah, this is also a glad I saw it for me too.
A like-minded glad I saw it. I can drink to that, Kevin.
Yes,
Cheers.
yes, indeed.
Cheers.
All right, perfect. Well, we're glad that we saw the Mitchells versus the Machines. Were you glad you saw the Mitchells versus the Machines? Hold that thought, because we got to go up pretty high for this next movie here. Things might get a little loud. They might get a little rhythmic. This is In the Heights.
En un barrio called Washington Heights, the streets were made of music. I am Usnavi, and you probably never heard my name. Reports of my fame are greatly exaggerated.
Morning, Usnavi.
Pan caliente, café con leche.
We still have to give a rating, so
need to see.
Need to see too. Hey!
Double need to see.
We did it. Whew. It's hot as hell out here. We better wear jeans and dance, because this is In the Heights. James, when we talked about the trailer, we were over the moon for it. Dancing over the moon for it? That one feels forced. Anyway, we were pretty excited about this. We didn't really have too much by way of criticisms. Now looking back on it, do you feel like this trailer sold the movie?
I think so, yeah. I mean, musicals are always kind of a mixed bag when it comes to how they're being marketed. But we're starting to get to that point where musicals are really leaning into the actual singing in the trailers.
Yes.
And
we're welcoming that with open fucking arms too.
Do you think we started that? We like our complaints early Hollywood listened to pretty well, and
we had been yelling about it for at least a couple of years. So
I remember
maybe we had something to do with the fucking ball rolling.
I think the Disney live action Beauty and the Beast may be the first one that I remember us like actively complaining about.
Yeah.
So in that sense, the visual style, the music, the culture, the basis, like I guess the general basis of the plot is all present in the trailer. So I think it sold it well. We'll get into it more with like when we go into non-spoiler or spoilery stuff, but in terms of plot, there's a lot that the trailers are not able to cover, and that's for good reason.
I will kind of tip my hand early. Looking back on this trailer, did it sell it well? Yes, I think it did. This is ultimately going to be an instance where I do think I like the trailer more than the movie itself. And we'll get into it. But when it comes to the actual trailer portion of things, yes, I think that this trailer absolutely does give you what you're in store for. Ultimately, I think it does. It really takes the best qualities of the movie and holds them up really fucking high, and it just works. I mean, even having seen the movie, now watching this trailer again, I was like, God damn it! This is just great. Should I watch In the Heights again? And then I thought about it. So now let's get into the review. James, what did you think of In the Heights, the movie?
Okay, so we're beyond the trailer aspects. We can talk about spoiler stuff. Kevin, I agree with you. I enjoyed this trailer more than the movie. And again, like you said, it's not that the trailer misrepresented what the movie was about. It's just not. That's just not the case. It was a good representation of what this movie's about. It's just, I don't have a slick way of saying it, so I'll be more clunky about it.
Go for it, dude.
There's just so much to cover that in terms of plot, in terms of character interactions and relationships and whatnot, that it's just like that would bog the trailer down like heavily if they included that. So they did the right thing by not kind of really going into, hey, what do these characters mean to each other, or what are like their goals really? The trailers don't really go into those at all. And you know
Because
why?
every single character in this does have a goal, does have a dream. I mean, for
one of-
fuck's sake, they're called the Little Dreamers. Like, of course, everyone in this goddamn movie has a dream. But yeah, they give everybody something, which is something that I really admire. But then it does turn into a question of, well, which ones do you think are interesting compared to
I
others?
think that this is a fun interaction and like thought process we're having with this movie, because that's a criticism I hear a lot with like other movies of like, oh, I really liked it and I like this and this character, but this character didn't have an arc, so I'm gonna knock it a point for that. And I'm just like, not every character in every movie can have an arc. And then I go, well, maybe they can. And then you watch In the Heights and go, yeah, maybe they shouldn't though. Not every single character has to have a
here's the deal, because I am definitely a big proponent of, I like all of the characters to have arcs when possible and within reason.
Yeah.
When I say within reason, I mean when you have an ensemble of 15 people. Okay, the more characters you add into the goddamn thing, the less attainable every character having an arc is.
Yes.
And at a certain point, then it's a matter of, well, can we condense this? Does every single character need to be in this? I think when we're talking from a writing perspective, or it then also shifts to, hey, give every character an arc, but that means that one of these arcs is going to be 3 scenes. That's the character, these are their dreams. Second scene, that's their complication. Third scene, end of arc, and that's it. And like that's all you're going to have time for because you have that massive of an ensemble.
Yeah.
Now, In the Heights is like, no. Everyone is going to have that screen time and everyone's going to have their say. And overall, I did feel the pace drag quite a bit. I would also say that I think this movie starts on an insane high. That opening dance number was like, I don't get it. Everyone talked up Hamilton like that was really great, and I saw it, and I think Hamilton's really great. I can't believe people weren't doing the same thing for In the Heights. Why weren't people lining around the block around the Pantages here in LA to get tickets for In the Heights? And then I kept watching In the Heights and was like, oh, right, it's not as tight as Hamilton is. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And bear in mind, of course, that makes sense. To a degree, I did not come into In the Heights thinking it was going to be at the level of Hamilton simply because, well, it didn't fucking stop the world for a while. It's speaking as someone that doesn't pay attention to Broadway musicals. I knew what Hamilton was, for fuck's sake. And I did not know what In the Heights was. All right, that kind of tips the hand that this probably isn't going to be as earth-shattering as Hamilton is. And that's fine. I don't need every movie to be earth-shattering. Now, it is. It's one of those things where I think it starts on an insane high. I think it's I love that opening number, and the dance out in the neighborhood, I think is great. I think that the pool number is super fucking fun.
The lottery ticket number, right? Like, what would you do if you won the lottery song? That was one of my favorites as well.
I loved the Abuela number. I think like her goodbye number, I think is really, really well done. Now, bear in mind, because this movie came out about a month ago from the time of this recording, it's been about a month since I've seen it personally. Now, beyond those three songs, yeah, I can tell you roughly what happens in the story and give you like a little plot synopsis, blah, 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 blah. We're kind of anticipating that you've seen the movie, and that's why you're listening to this. Now, outside of those three numbers, really don't remember too many other of like the song. The emotional impact they had on me, it's really those three songs were the only three that I like really enjoyed. And everything else, I was just kind of on this milk toast. Yeah, good. Like, yeah, that definitely sounds like Lin-Manuel Miranda writing a rap song. Good. Yeah, I think that's solid. And that was about as much as my enjoyment got. And I think you're right, James, to a degree. It is pretty cluttered in terms of its characters and how ambitious it is. And I really do admire that ambition, but at a certain point, did start to feel like there was a little bit too much going on in that front.
Yeah, I think you phrased it good. I admire the ambition, but it just, in terms of when you're sitting down to watch a movie, I personally like a little bit more focus than what this movie provided. Everyone had like a thing that I felt like, oh crap, who's this person? Oh, I need to know their thing now. Is there any supporting characters? Like they all are main characters in their own like thing that they have going on, and that was exhausting to try and follow.
And again, it's specifically because they're actively developing all of the stories throughout like the 2.5 hour runtime, but it's also all through song too.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I feel like maybe you could pull that off if this was just a straightforward film.
And
it would still probably be a lot, but it's the fact that they're doing all of those characters, but it's also you're just keeping up with the rhythm of the song and you're kind of thinking about the song too and making sure you're keeping up with the lyrics and everything, and also trying to follow those character arcs.
And to bring up the songs again, like you said, I agree with you. Outside of the lottery swimming pool song in the opening number, they're mostly forgettable, which is crazy because there's so many songs. Just completely filled to the brim with songs and dance numbers, and it's all done excellently, Kevin. It's all done great. Look,
it's so hard because I would love to be constructive right now and say, oh, but here are some things that we can look at these songs and James and I can give like a very constructive reason why, oh yeah, here's why this doesn't necessarily work at the same level as that opening number. And it's really hard, folks, because I'm not really a music guy, I just have to be really impressionistic with this and just say, yeah, I really like that opening number. Yeah, the pool number is really good. And then just leave it at that. That's as far as I can fucking take you. I'm so sorry that I don't have anything more constructive than that.
Well, and that's okay. And, I think my criticisms revolve completely around like pacing and focus. And it's just to the point where there were so many people that you're supposed to that this movie wants you to follow, right? That I got kind of bogged down with so much information that I didn't spend enough time with any one character. So when all these characters started like finishing up their character arcs or achieving their dreams, I wasn't as emotionally impacted because I haven't been spending this whole movie with you. I have to divide it among all of the other characters. So it's just kind of like the emotional impact gets a little diluted because I'm also just having to spend my focus on all these people. Like the Abuela song you mentioned. The song is spectacular and moving and beautiful, but it's also very not happy, but it's positive, right? It's just this kind of like, this is my time. Abuela is dying, right?
Yes.
This is my time and we should be okay with this. And we as the audience, we get on her level. But then we need to sit through like 20 minutes of the characters mourning over Abuela, and now we need to wait for them to get to our level. And
that's an interesting way to put it. Yeah.
I was just like, when she finally passed away at the end of the song, I'm just like, oh no, I'm going to have to like sit through everyone mourning over Abuela when we just got this like really beautiful send off for her. And it's such a weird thing. And then near the end too, like the whole finale show-stopping like number. The whole number started because the nail salon people were like leaving town, and according to them, by their own description, they're not even moving that far away. You can all come still and give me your business. But they were pissed that no one was throwing them a big party for leaving, basically. So then they storm over to where everyone is mourning the death of Abuela and trying not to die in this like blackout 113-degree heat.
Yep.
And then they're like, how dare you all? You should be partying right now. And then they all party. And it just felt so weird to me.
Yeah, the Ebola number works for me in isolation. And
In isolation, right.
Even then, just on the practical level of everybody knew Ebola in this neighborhood. Isn't there like hundreds of thousands of people in like a neighborhood in New York? Like, that's kind of fucking wild. That would kind of clash for me too, because it's, hey, we're showing you this real New York neighborhood, but it did also feel like a fantasy in some ways too. Yeah, it's interesting. But I do agree that, yeah, there is some of that whiplash, and that is present throughout the entire movie too. And it's interesting, when the movie ended, I felt warmer on it than I do now. With a little bit of distance, I kind of realized how little impact it made on me. Now that I'm a little bit further away, I spend more of my time going, yeah, I mean, like, the framing device doesn't really quite work for me. And yeah, I don't really remember that one character's arc, even though I know it really wanted me to connect to Usnavi's love interest. And I feel terrible. I don't even remember the character's name.
Oh, the names are the hardest thing to remember. I do like, I'm looking at their photos right now, and like I can remember all their arcs and like their dreams and stuff. But yeah, their names. Usnavi is the only one I really remember, and
because he's our center character, yeah.
But also they do a whole bit about how he got his name, and that's memorable. Like, that stuck out to me. Love interest between Usnavi and the female. It got to the point where it got like really petty, like right at the
in the fucking club,
the dancing club. I was like, they're acting like 16-year-olds instead of like
Usnavi
adults.
Really is, yeah.
I think both of them were. Especially her at like, once she saw him later, I don't know. I think they were both acting very, very childish, and for no reason. Like, they both really liked each other. Then they got there, and then there was like, they tried to dance, but then they didn't want to dance, but they sort of wanted to dance. It's just like, it was like, why do I don't care.
Abuela's gonna die, goddammit.
She sees people bickering about like, you didn't dance with me, and she's just like, ugh, I'm not dealing with this.
Get me in a fucking subway tunnel with a bunch of period appropriate dancers right now.
But yeah, okay, so lastly, the one thing I did want to bring up, you briefly mentioned it, but the framing device. So it's kind of like a twist ending that they try to do, where
yes,
is, hey, you know what, Kevin, this kind of fits your flash drive thing from the Mitchells versus the Machine. The whole time you're like, oh, his dream is getting to that island, and then it's like, the island, I guess it doesn't get destroyed, it's not like that dream gets destroyed. He still could do it if he wanted to, but he just chooses that his island was here all along. I was lukewarm on that. I didn't mind that.
It's kind of easy to get ahead with it. Again, kind of like what we were talking with Mitchells versus the Machines. Like, for different reasons, it had hit the point where with Mitchells, I just got overwhelmed from a visual standpoint. Within the Heights, I was just kind of getting overwhelmed with how much character and how much story the movie was trying to get across. And because of that, it's something where I would look at them cutting to Usnavi with the kids, who are super precocious. And it was hitting a point, especially once I hit the 30 or 40 minute mark, where I was thinking to myself, man, if that's what this is, if it's Usnavi is going to go, but now we've made the central conflict kind of baked around, hey, Usnavi is trying to leave, even though there's so much positive work you can do here in Queens. Once they made that the central conflict, my gut reaction was, Probably shouldn't have showed him on a fucking island then, huh? And then once it hit like an hour and a half, I went, no, like you wouldn't show him at the island if that's what he ultimately ends up choosing. They're gonna twist this somehow. And then yeah, they did. Like it does mean that you will kind of get ahead of it once you kind of figure out the character's arc, because again, there are so many arcs within this that eventually it hits a point where like we need to talk to Jimmy Smits, and it's like I'm just gonna think about Usnavi. I'm going to keep my focus on like these 3 or 4 characters that I'm like really connecting with.
I mean, we literally can't talk about every aspect of this movie because we would be here until the cows came home. So I think I'm done talking about it.
All right, James. I just have 8 more dance numbers to do, and then I'm totally happy to wrap this up. If your grandma's nearby, make sure her air conditioning is good, because I got another song here and a 1 and a 2 and nah, I'm good, man. For me, fuck, dude. If you had asked me last month when I watched this, I would have said that this would be Still Glad I Saw It. I think now, with some distance, which is kind of ironic given the name of this rating, I'd say this is at a shoulda waited. Again, I do really applaud its ambition, and there are points, particularly with that pool scene, where I feel like that ambition really does come to its fruition, and it is really fucking well executed.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to have seen it. But that said, this was like one of the first movies that you could see in a movie theater. It still felt a little early for me, so I ended up watching this on HBO Max.
Same.
And that's exactly, I feel like, the perfect environment for me with this movie.
My rating for this is the same right now as it would have been if you asked me like the night I watched it. And that is also a should have waited.
Well, enough about us. What did you think of In the Heights? You can hit us up at our email at trailerhitchmailbox@gmail.com. Otherwise, feel free to hit us up on any of our social medias. You can find us on Facebook. If you just search Trailer Hitch Podcast, you can find us there. You can find us on Twitter at Trailer Hitch Pod, Instagram at Trailer Hitch Podcast. You can comment on the very YouTube video you're watching. Or it would also be really great if you liked and subscribed on YouTube or your current podcast app of choice. Helps us find more listeners, and we would love to talk to more people about trailers and about movies. And bear in mind, feel free to write in if you had thoughts on the Ghostbusters Afterlife trailer. Do you feel like that nostalgia was enough for you? Were you really lamenting the lack of comedy within it? Feel free to just write in and shoot the shit with us. We're more than happy to hit you up, and with your permission, we are more than happy to read your correspondence on the show. Before we go, we would like to thank Danny Schmitz from Lost in a Name for the amazing intro that you hear at the top of every episode. We'd like to thank Rachel Ashley for the amazing cover art that you see on our various social medias. You can find her work at Mighty Creations on Instagram. We would like to thank Jenny Leesky, our Bad Movie and social media correspondent, for her sterling work week in and week out. And we would like to thank Casey Clowers for the amazing outro, which you'll hear momentarily.
Hey, you really threw a curveball with the Jenny Leesky there.
I realized, I realized, this is the first time I'm calling her Jenny Leesky, and I've been calling her Hawks, even though she changed her last name, 6 months ago?
She did not change her last name, Kevin.
Wait, she didn't?
She didn't. Which is why. But she goes by. She'll go by Jenny Leesky on Facebook, or
that's what was throwing me off.
Or if people call her that, she's not like gonna correct them or anything. But yeah, no, she kept her name, and I am fully supportive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Then
so
I'll just go back and call her Jenny Hawks.
We're gonna save this episode, and this is gonna be that weird one that she's called Jenny Leesky. But you know what? By her own admission, she's not gonna correct it. It's fine.
Okay, well, but going forward, I will be calling her Jenny Hawks. It was something where it was like, in retrospect, I feel like you would have corrected me had she changed her name if I'd kept calling her Hawks over the course of the past 6 months. But no, you're completely right, man. She'll be called Jenny Leesky this episode, and I'll just see if she texts me and yells at me. We'll just go from there.
You can't mount holy sails without a sailor stitch, and you can't haul your stuff without a trailer hitch. Trailer
Whiskey then water, because I got like some intense heartburn right now.
Has anyone ever tried to snort Tums? Probably, right? That's the biggest difference between 13 and 30, by the way. Are you snorting pixie sticks or are you snorting Tums?
Just putting Tums powder in a straw and just eating it like it's a pixie stick. That's just like a weird kind of thing that I'm stuck in.
That's 40, James.
Yeah, trying to live my inner child while also not having indigestion.
We could probably make a killing with that shit if we start putting Tums in pixie sticks wrappers. James, we would just be on yachts talking about trailers.